Review Book 101's all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of several books, no other than Mr. Flavio Souza-Campos. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Flavio, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Well, hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be here, Daniel. I really enjoy your program. I enjoy your interviews, and I love the way you do your work and how organized you are. I get your emails often, and I just love the way you work this. And it's really an honor to be here. Thank you so much. And it's an honor to share a few ideas with your audience. And I'm sure your audience, being like you, is just composed of wonderful human beings. So once again, it's an honor to be here. Thank you. I enjoy doing this because I do hypnotherapy, I do hypnosis, and I help people sort out relationship problems. And when you think of a relationship, in terms of like a romantic relationship, there are only four states you could be in, right? Either you are ready for love, looking for somebody, you're single, looking ready, or you are with somebody in a state of joy and flow. In other words, you're in love, or you are in conflict. You have a partner, you're fighting, you're not talking, conflict. So that's the third stage. Or you're in heartbreak. Now, what's interesting is whenever I talk about this in classes, in lectures, or my books, people sometimes think that these states have something to do with the relationship status. In other words, if I'm married, I'm automatically in joy and flow. And that's not true. Relationship status is one thing. You could be single, married, divorced. That's a separate axis, a separate thing. But whether you are legally single or functionally single or married or divorced, you could always be in one of those four emotional states: ready and looking, flow and joy, conflict, or heartbreak. In other words, a person could be fully married and feel single. In other words, this has happened to me. I remember I had a partner once, a girlfriend once, for a few years, and I loved her very much. We got along really well. But after a couple of years, she told me, being with you, I feel like I'm single. And that's a very interesting feedback that I got from her, because whatever I was doing or not doing didn't give her the impression that she was fully enveloped by my presence, right? So this was many years ago, and I've been learning ever since. But the point I'm saying is that she felt single even though she was in a relationship. So again, these four emotional states occur whether a person is in a relationship or not. I work with couples all the time who feel single, or they're in conflict, or they're fighting, or they're ignoring each other, or there's infidelity. So heartbreak. When there's infidelity, there's heartbreak. So the four emotional states are ready and looking, joy flow, conflict, or heartbreak. And your relationship status can be one of any one of the ones that we are already familiar with: single, divorced, married, whatever. But so those are two different things. So I enjoy working with people in their relationship problems, if you will. Nobody comes to the therapist when everything is working, right? So we typically talk about problems. And of particular importance to me is the single person who cannot find anybody. That's always, it fascinates me, because we live in a very well connected world, and yet we are now currently living an epidemic of loneliness. And this is not my opinion. The Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Murphy Vick, wrote a book a couple years ago, 2, 3 years ago, talking about this epidemic of loneliness and the physical consequences of loneliness. In other words, diseases become worse and increase if a person is lonely. So it's not just a feeling, it's actually a health problem as well.
Health problem indeed. And Mr. Flavio Sousa Campos, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Let's talk about your book, How to Find Your Person. Your person starts internally. What's the most critical mindset shift someone stuck in singleness or wrong person cycle must make before external change matter?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. That's one thing I love about your work. Your questions are super awesome. I can also tell you later how this book came to be, but let me tell you what the mindset shift is. The the mindset shift is one of looking for the right person for me out there versus becoming the right person, me becoming the right person in order to match up with the person I want. So energetically, vibrationally, cosmically, however you want to look at this, spiritually, mentally, however you want to label this, we are always with the person that corresponds to our vibrational level. Ancient mystics in Hermetic law, for instance, going back 10,000 years, people talked about the law of correspondence. All of this stuff is outlined really well, articulated really well in a book that's only a couple hundred years old called The Kybalion. And they talk about the law of correspondence. And so we match up because we're vibrating at a similar frequency, metaphorically speaking. So when a person says, I'm single and I'm looking for a partner, the initial mindset is if I can only go out there in the world and find the right person for me, then I'll be okay. That's the mindset. The shift that this book proposes is one of, you know what? Let me take a look at the person I'd like to be with, like in my own mind, in my own fantasy. Who would I like to be with? What kind of relationship would I like? And then the question is, am I a suitable partner to that person? So I'll give you an example. And this is a very simple example just to illustrate the point. Suppose that I'm what we call here in America a couch potato. I actually enjoy exercising, hiking, whatever, but suppose I like to stay home all day and do nothing but sit on the couch and watch TV. Nothing wrong with that, provided you have a partner who enjoys that, right? Then you can both sit on the couch and watch TV. Great. You can have a great time, eat the popcorn, and actually celebrate one another. The problem is, if I want to be with somebody who's really physically active, let's say, right? This person enjoys hiking every day. Again, I'm exaggerating a little just to make the point. Well, it's not going to work out unless I'm also that kind of person. Now, in this case, I'm talking about an activity that I enjoy doing or not enjoy doing, but extrapolate that not just to a desire or an activity, but to a mindset. So we end up with the people that match something about us. Incidentally, in couples therapy, this is also the root of all conflicts among couples because we end up seeing things in other people, in our partners, that reflect parts of ourselves that we don't like. In other words, I think of myself as being very physically active, let's say, right, to continue with this example, but I look at my partner and he or she, is an athlete. Suddenly, I feel like a slouch. I feel like very lazy. So then that bothers me. Hence the conflict. I begin to say, you cannot go training today. You're leaving the house too often. Who are you meeting at the gym? That kind of thing. Then the conflict begins, and ultimately, it is because that person reminds me of a problem within myself. So again, these examples are a little bit simplistic, but not too exaggerated because you see this every day at the office with couples in conflict and with singles who are looking out there for what they think would complement them, but they haven't made the mindset shift of becoming the person who's compatible with the person they claim to want.
Mr. Flavio, why do people unconsciously attack or attract patterns who mirror past wounds or dynamics? How do readers identify their specific attraction to dysfunction pattern?
Well, that's a fantastic one. That's a great question. Listen, the understanding of that question, the answers behind that question go back, uh, uh, you know, over 100 years for sure. We know, for instance, there is a paper by Dr. Sigmund Freud that's at least 100 years old, I believe, in which he talks about a woman. He was a physician and he was working with a patient, right, who was a woman, and she was in counseling with him. Remember, he originated psychoanalysis. And the point is that she had been married something like 3 times prior, and she was now married to a man who happened to be an alcoholic. So Dr. Freud asked her, "How did you meet him?" And she says, "Well, I met him at a bar or at a party or something like that, you know." And he asked her, "What was it like to meet him?" And she says, "Well, I smelt alcohol on his breath when we first spoke." And then she said, here's the classical phrase. She says, "I knew it was trouble, but it felt so good because it felt familiar." It turns out that this woman's father had been an alcoholic. So she grew up with an alcoholic father smelling alcohol, and therefore they felt familiar. And the feeling of familiarity is what we initially, as one of the things that we identify as being in love, right? Is one thing. So there are others as well. But the point to answer your question is that whenever we meet somebody and we say, I feel really attracted to this person, it is because something about them, it could be their looks, it could be whatever it is, but there's something about them that matches an image, if you will, or a pattern that we have stored inside of us at the level of the unconscious. We're not necessarily aware of it. We just look at the person and say, wow, I really like you. But we really don't know that person. Incidentally, this explains why historically and also worldwide, many people choose marriage partners based on the arranged model, meaning a village elder or the parents will arrange for the marriage to occur with various degrees of consentment or various degrees of knowing one another. And some of these marriages statistically do equally well, if not better, than marriages in the West, where we think that we choose our partners based on what we like. And you know, it's interesting because what we like changes all the time. Fashion changes all the time. That's a great example of that. And as a result, you know, we have a really high incidence of divorce and all of that. Not a problem. There's nothing wrong with people changing partners. That wouldn't be a problem if we could do that in a civilized way that doesn't destroy, in some cases, children's lives. In other words, if a couple simply agreed to go their separate ways and negotiate, the kids keep the house and we're going to negotiate how to co-parent, you know, that would be okay. If you want to get a different partner consensually, that's fine. The problem in our society is that you're seeing a very high degree of, you know, when people get divorced, there's a war, typically, not everybody, obviously. But when that happens, it's a tragedy because you end up sacrificing the kids quite a bit if they have kids, right? Now, if a couple doesn't have kids and they want to go their separate ways, whatever, that's their personal choice. The problem is when we bring somebody else into the relationship, like a child, and then use that child as a pawn through which to negotiate, you know, problems with our spouses, that becomes a problem. So working out our love issues makes a huge difference to the next generation.
Very well said, Mr. Flavio. Beautifully articulated. How does building a radical self worth actually change the quality of partners one attracts?
Changing what? The first word you said? How does what?
How does building a radical self worth?
Radical self worth?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, that's a great one. So what happens is that when the self-worth, in other words, when that image of ourselves is damaged, oftentimes because of childhood experiences, then we go out into the world unconsciously looking for punishment. You say it's all unconscious. Remember, I'm a hypnotist. I've done over 44,000 sessions, and I only say this to illustrate the fact that when you do that many sessions, you understand the relationship between our behaviors and the unconscious motivation for those behaviors. So I could tell you that I eat ice cream because I enjoy it, let's say, right? So that explanation, why do you do it? Well, because I enjoy it. That explanation may not be the real cause, the real reason why I eat the ice cream. That might be what we call a rationalization, which is my mind's way of explaining away what I otherwise do not understand. So when you hypnotize a person, you get in touch with their unconscious mind, and then I asked the same question: why do we eat excess ice cream? Let's just say the person is obese and they came to see me to lose weight, as an example, right? And the problem is that they eat too much ice cream. I'm giving you this as an example. The answer might be because I want to look ugly. Again, I'm exaggerating. I'm not saying this is one particular person, but I'm illustrating a fact that, when the self-worth that you say is damaged, oftentimes in childhood, we end up looking for experiences in the world that punish us. And this is the root of most of our problems. I have worked with countless people, for instance, who cannot make a living, let's say, and they're always broke, they're always in debt, they're being evicted from their apartment. Their cars are old and unreliable. They get stranded on the side of the highway because they don't have reliable transportation. They cannot pay child support, they cannot support their families. And when you work with them and you find out what's going on here, there's this profound lack of self worth where they just don't think they deserve a good life. You see, and that goes all the way back to early childhood. So building a healthy self-worth. And people ask me, so what's healthy? I'm the best in the world. No, that's not healthy. That's egotistical, that's arrogant. A healthy self-worth is when you think of yourself as good enough, right? And not worse than anybody else, but not necessarily better than others as well. You see, it's kind of an in between thing, because there's always somebody better than us. There are better authors than I am. There are better doctors than I am. There are better hypnotists than I am, obviously, right? So if I thought of myself as the best, that would be an exaggeration. But if I thought of myself as the worst, then that's also a problem. That's also an exaggeration. So a healthy way to look at ourselves is I'm good enough. I can get the job done. I'm good enough. And, I'm not the best, but I'm not the worst. I'm good enough. And that mentality, that's just a quick way for you to check yourself and see if your self worth might be a little bit damaged. Think of yourself as good enough. Now, people ask me, what if I'm not good enough? I'm not a good enough tennis player, for instance, right? So if we're talking about tennis, which I don't play tennis, then I'm not good enough. Well, if I want to go play tennis with you, then it's up to me to go learn and practice and train. So I'm not saying that we're good enough in every domain of life, but you're good enough as a person. You're good enough as a human being. And then if there's one particular activity that you find you're lacking experience in, let's go get the experience. Let's go read the books. Let's go listen to the podcasts such as this one so that we can improve upon ourselves, right? But always reaching for that. I'm good. I'm okay, right? Not better than others, but I'm okay. I'm good enough. That's a healthy way to look at it.
Healthy indeed. Mr. Flavio, as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, I am working on a couple of books. One of my novels that just won a major international award. I'm really, really proud because when you write a book, it's you spend a ton of hours alone in front of a screen, a computer, and you don't know if anybody's ever going to read it, if anybody's going to like it. So I wrote another book. It's I wrote it under Frank Baylor. If you're on Amazon, go to Frank Baylor. Go to a different, do a search for another author.
Okay.
Frank Baylor. Frank
Frank Beller.
Baylor, Baler.
Okay. And who is Frank Beller, mister?
Frank Baylor is a fictional character. So it's my novel. That book won a major international award, and it's me. It's I write it as what do you call that, a pen name, because it's a mystical novel. So I didn't want to confuse it with my non-fictional professional books, right?
Book.
So I wrote it under a different name, but it's that's the book that won the award. And when you do a project like that, it's hours and hours and hours alone, whatever. No, so when somebody actually reads the book and like it, it's like, wow, that's a big deal. Well, that book was written, it's a much larger book, so it's actually 3 volumes. And when I wrote it, my editor said, well, look, this is too long, so we split it up into 3 volumes. And then that one, so then I summarized it, and that's why this is called an abbreviated mystical novel. So that's the summary of the first 3 volumes. I'm working on the fourth volume right now, and that's coming out next. So that's like a big passion of mine because Frank Baylor is what Freud would call it like an outer ego. He's like my hero type of thing. Frank Baylor's who I would like to become when I grow up type of thing. So 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 yeah, he's an awesome guy. So he has an experience where he breaks down and he's looking for himself, whatever. But what that book outlines is something called the mystical path. We talked about the Kybalion earlier. That book outlines what the mystical path looks like through a series of initiations that Frank Baylor receives. So I think it's an awesome book, and I suspect I shouldn't be saying that, but other people have read it and liked it as well. And I was recently awarded the Pen and Quill Award. But the point is that you asked me about goals. I want to publish the sequel to that book, the first three volumes, which is the expanded version of the abbreviated version. So that's what I'm really working on. And I was fortunate and honored. A professor of mine from medical school, knowing that I'm an author, asked me to edit one of his books on Lyme disease. So, which is a very, very complicated issue in medicine, right? So it's an under recognized problem in medicine. So he's a specialist in Lyme disease. He wrote the book. He asked me to edit it for him. So I'm very honored to do that. So those two things are running in parallel in addition to my work as a therapist. So I'm very excited about this next year. I think a lot of great things are going to happen.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Flavio, and congratulations for award.
Thank you. Thank you. And
And looking for more and more and more awards. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author like you?
the piece, it's simple. Start. Write down anything. In other words, you have ideas all the time. And, Stephen King is probably the most recognized and successful author ever, or at least in this last 100 years or so, Stephen King. And he wanted to be a writer, and he couldn't get published. Nobody liked his work. And one day he wrote a little piece of what became a novel, right? What became a book, and he didn't think was any good, and he was used to being rejected, so he threw it away. His wife came into his studio to clean it up, found the manuscript. Back then people wrote on pencil and paper. Found the manuscript and said, "Dude, this is gold. This is great. Let's publish this." So he finished that book, and the rest is history. That's Stephen King. You can read up the story later. The point I'm making is, if you think you have a story within you, write it. You know, Look, nobody becomes a great author, and I'm certainly just a beginner. I'm just saying nobody becomes a great author the first time around. Look at Stephen King. He wrote a lot before he had his first major hit. So if you think you have a story, write it, work on your craft, because it's all about beginning. You want to be an author, you have a story to tell, you have some experiences to share, do it, share it. Even if you share with one person, your neighbor, great, you started, you know, and then your next one might be a little bit better. So let's go out there and do this, because you got to remember something. What is common for you, right? You might know something that I don't. So what you know is common to you, but to me, it's not common. To me, it might be a treasure. So when you write it, when you become an author, you're serving us all by sharing the treasures that live within you that otherwise would really die with us, right? So go ahead and share the treasure with others.
Yes, people, stop procrastinating and share your talents to the world. Thank you, Mr. Flavia, for your empowering advice. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, of course, my book 101 review in its fifth season too, a comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in its first on fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in fourth season, as well as my movie 101 review and music 101 and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. Flavio, is finding your person the end goal or the beginning of a deeper relational growth? What legacy do you hope readers build?
What legacy? I think finding yourself. I think that's the biggest legacy that each one of us can aim for. I don't think any one of us know ourselves yet fully. I think we're all a project in development. We're just beginning. We're just getting started. As a civilization, we're just getting started. As individuals, we're just getting started. I'm so happy to live at this time, in history, because there's so much going on, and I'm happy to share this earth and this moment of history with all of you on this earth. I think it's awesome. But I feel that we're just getting started. There's so much more to learn and to discover. So when we were children, there was this natural curiosity, remember? My only suggestion, if I may, is reawaken. In case, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you have that curiosity, right? So we're kind of preaching to the choir, as we say. But stimulate that curiosity within you and keep on learning, keep on discovering life, because it's absolutely awesome. And I love your work. I mean, all these podcasts, all of this knowledge that you share, this is beautiful. What you do is absolutely awesome. You're my hero. That's really awesome.
Likewise, Mr. Flavio, thank you so much and keep up the good work. Empowering people all over the world is something else. And we are looking forward for more and more award-winning piece.
Yes.
And we salute you of what you are doing. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, the work that they're doing here in this podcast is absolutely wonderful. Let's share the podcast with everybody so that we can all learn and grow. Blessings to all of you. And thank you, Daniel.
Yes, yes, people, let's support Mr. Flavio Souza-Campos because if you support him more and more and more, empowering award-winning piece to come. So, Mr. Flavio, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Blessings. Have a great day. Bye bye.
More to come, people. See you soon.